The night was quiet at observatory. Park sat alone in front of his computer, drinking cold coffee and watching the stars through his telescope feed. He had been an astronomer for 15 years. He had seen comets, meteors, and distant galaxies, but he had never seen anything like the lights that appeared on his screen that night. At first he thought it was a mistake. Maybe the equipment was broken. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The lights were still there, hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation toward Earth. Picked up his phone and called his colleague. She answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy and annoyed. "Do you know what time it is?" she asked. "Come to the observatory," said. His voice was shaking. "Right now, please." Something in his tone made stop complaining. 30 minutes later, she stood beside him, staring at the same screen. Her face had gone pale. "That is not possible," she whispered. "I know," replied. They counted the lights together. 3,000 objects, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. The objects were moving fast. At their current speed, they would reach Earth in less than 2 days. Made the call that changed human history. He reported his findings to the Korean Space Agency, who reported to the government, who reported to the United Nations. Within hours, every world leader knew the truth. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and whatever was coming did not look friendly. Far above Earth, Admiral stood on the bridge of his ship, the Eternal Dominion. He was tall and covered in gray scales. His eyes were black and cold. He had commanded the fleet for over 200 years and had conquered more planets than he could remember. This new world would be no different. His soldiers had already scanned the planet. The creatures living there called themselves humans. They were small, weak, and primitive. They had only recently discovered space travel. Their weapons were laughable. Their defenses were almost non-existent. Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be easy. He ordered his communications officer to send the standard message. Every species received the same ultimatum before conquest. It was tradition. It was also entertaining to watch them panic. The message was simple: surrender all resources, accept slavery, or face complete destruction. The humans had 24 hours to respond. Expected surrender. Every species surrendered. The Empire had conquered 47 civilizations and not one had chosen to fight. Why would they? They had the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Their ships could burn entire continents. Their soldiers were stronger, faster, and better equipped than any enemy. Resistance was not just foolish, it was suicide. On Earth, the message arrived at the United Nations headquarters. World leaders gathered in emergency sessions. Military generals calculated their odds. Scientists analyzed the alien technology. Everyone reached the same conclusion. Humanity could not win this war. The alien ships were too advanced. Their weapons were too powerful. If humans fought, they would die. Millions, maybe billions, would be killed. Cities would burn. Civilization would collapse. The logical choice was clear: surrender, save as many lives as possible, accept defeat and hope for mercy. But something strange happened in that meeting room. A general from Korea stood up. His name was Oh, and he was 60 years old. He had fought in wars before. He had seen death and destruction. He knew better than anyone what humanity faced. "If we surrender," he said quietly, "we die as slaves. If we fight, we might still die, but we die free." The room was silent. "I would rather die standing," continued, "than live on my knees." One by one, other leaders began to speak. Some agreed with, others argued for surrender. The debate lasted for hours. Voices were raised, fists hit tables, some leaders cried. In the end, they voted. The result shocked everyone, including the humans themselves. By a narrow margin, humanity chose to fight. The response was sent to the alien fleet. It was short and direct. "We reject your terms. Earth will never surrender." On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral received the message. He read it twice, then laughed. His officers laughed with him. This was the funniest thing they had heard in years. "These creatures are insane," one officer said. "They are stupid," another agreed. Waved his hand dismissively. "It does not matter, they will learn, begin the invasion." The fleet moved into attack formation. Dropships prepared for launch. Soldiers checked their weapons and armor. Everything was ready. Looked down at the blue planet below. Such a pretty world, such foolish creatures. They had no idea what was coming, but did not know something important. He had studied human technology. He had studied human biology. He had studied human civilization. He had not studied human history. He did not know that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. He did not know about their world wars, their revolutions, their endless conflicts. He did not know that war was not something humans feared. War was something humans understood better than anything else in the universe. He did not know that humans could be cruel, vicious, and relentless. He did not know that they never forgot an enemy. He did not know that they would rather destroy themselves than accept defeat. He did not know that he had just made the worst mistake of his very long life. On Earth, Park watched the alien fleet begin its descent. Beside him was crying softly. "What do we do now?" she asked. Thought about his family, his parents, his younger sister. He thought about all the people who would die in the coming days. Then he thought about the message humanity had sent. "We will never surrender." "We fight," he said simply. "We fight until we cannot fight anymore." Above them, the sky filled with fire as the first alien ships entered the atmosphere. The war had begun. The soldiers landed in Seoul at dawn. Their dropships fell from the sky like metal rain. Thousands of soldiers poured out, their plasma rifles ready, their armor shining in the morning light. They expected the humans to run. They expected screaming, panic, and chaos. They expected easy victory. They were wrong. Lieutenant heard the explosions from underground. She was in the subway tunnels with her squad of 12 soldiers. They had been hiding there for 3 days, waiting for the invasion to begin. Was 32 years old. She was small, thin, and tired. She had not slept properly in weeks, but her eyes were sharp and her hands were steady. "They are here," she said to her squad. "Remember the plan, we do not fight fair, we fight to win." Above ground, the soldiers marched through the empty streets. The humans had evacuated the city center. Buildings stood silent and dark. It was too quiet. The alien commander, a large soldier named, felt uneasy. Where were the humans? Where was the resistance? He got his answer when the first bomb exploded. The blast came from beneath the street. It threw 3 soldiers into the air. Before they landed, gunfire erupted from the windows of nearby buildings. Human soldiers appeared from everywhere, shooting, throwing grenades, then disappearing again. Screamed orders. His soldiers returned fire. Their plasma weapons burned holes through walls and melted steel. But the humans were already gone. They moved through the buildings like ghosts, striking and vanishing before they could respond. Underground listened to the chaos above. She smiled grimly. "Phase 2, she ordered. Her squad moved deeper into the tunnels. They had rigged explosives along the subway lines. When they followed them underground, they would spring the trap. An hour later, ordered his soldiers into the tunnels. He was furious. His unit had lost 50 soldiers to human attacks. The small creatures were everywhere and nowhere. They refused to stand and fight like proper warriors. The soldiers entered the subway system. It was dark and narrow. Their large bodies barely fit through the passages. They activated their helmet lights and moved forward. Watched them on the security cameras. She counted the soldiers. 100, 200, 300. "Now," she said. The explosions brought down the tunnel ceilings. Thousands of tons of concrete and steel collapsed on the soldiers. Those who survived the collapse were trapped in darkness. Their communications were blocked. Their weapons were useless in the tight spaces. Squad moved through the maintenance passages. They knew every tunnel, every corner, every hiding spot. They had grown up in this city. This was their home. One by one, they found the surviving soldiers. One by one, they killed them. On the other side of Seoul, Sergeant Han Minyu was having a worse day. His unit had been caught in the open when they landed. Half his soldiers were dead. The rest were scattered. Minyu himself had been shot twice, once in the shoulder and once in the leg. He could barely walk. But he kept moving. He found himself on a rooftop facing a commander. The alien was huge, almost 3 meters tall. His armor was covered in medals and symbols of rank. He looked at Minyu with disgust. "Surrender," the commander said in broken Korean. They had learned human languages from radio transmissions. "You are defeated." Minyu looked at the alien. He looked at his own wounds. He thought about his family, his friends, all the people who were dying across the city. "No," he said. The commander raised his weapon. Minyu was faster. He did not try to shoot. He did not try to run. Instead, he charged forward and grabbed the alien around the waist. The commander was surprised. No enemy had ever attacked like this. By the time he understood what was happening, Minyu had pushed them both off the rooftop. They fell 30 meters. The commander hit the ground first. His armor cracked. His body broke. Minyu landed on top of him, bones shattering on impact. A human soldier found them an hour later. The commander was dead. Minyu was barely alive, blood pooling around him. "Artillery," Minyu whispered. He pointed at the commander's radio. "Coordinates on the radio, enemy base, call it in." He died before the soldier could respond. But the soldier made the call. 30 minutes later, human artillery destroyed the forward base. Stories like these spread across the planet. Humans who refused to surrender. Humans who sacrificed themselves to take down single enemies. Humans who fought with knives, rocks, and bare hands when their bullets ran out. On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral received reports from every continent. The invasion was not going as planned. Casualties were higher than expected, much higher. His researcher approached him with a tablet. "Admiral, I have been studying human history," said. His voice was nervous. "I think we made a mistake." Glared at him. "Explain." Showed him the tablet. It displayed images of human wars, trenches filled with bodies, cities reduced to rubble, weapons of terrible power. "They have been fighting each other for their entire existence," said. "They have developed thousands of ways to kill. They have fought wars that lasted decades. They have weapons that can destroy entire cities." Stared at the images. He saw soldiers charging into certain death. He saw civilians picking up weapons. He saw a species that did not understand the concept of surrender. "They are insane," he whispered. "Yes," agreed. "And that is why we cannot beat them. They do not fight to win. They fight because fighting is what they do. Even when they are losing, they keep fighting. Even when they are dying, they keep fighting." Was silent for a long moment. "What have we done?" he finally asked. Below them, on the burning surface of Earth, the humans continued to fight. They were losing. They knew they were losing, but they did not stop. They would never stop. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. The controlled 30% of Earth's surface. They had expected to control everything by now. They had expected the war to be over in weeks. They were still fighting. Deep beneath the city in a bunker that had survived dozens of bombing raids, Doctor worked without sleep. She was 45 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. Before the war, she had been a professor of physics. Now she was a weapons designer. Her laboratory was filled with broken alien equipment, captured rifles, destroyed armor, pieces of crashed ships. For 6 months she had studied every piece, learning how technology worked. Tonight she finally understood. The used plasma weapons. The plasma was hot enough to melt steel. Human armor could not stop it. Human buildings could not stop it. Nothing could stop it. But had found a weakness. The plasma was contained by magnetic fields. If she could disrupt those fields, the weapons would fail. Better yet, if she could copy those fields, she could make human weapons just as powerful. She worked through the night, combining technology with human engineering. By morning, she had created something new. A rifle that looked human but fired plasma rounds. A bullet that could punch through armor like paper. She called General O. "I have something," she said, "something that will change the war." 1 week later, Captain held one of his new rifles in his hands. He was 38 years old, a career soldier who had survived 6 months of constant fighting. Half his original unit was dead. The other half had been replaced twice. He looked at his soldiers, 50 men and women from 12 different countries. Korean, American, Chinese, French, Nigerian. The war had erased national borders. They were all just humans now. "Today we take back our first piece of land," said. "The enemy base outside, 300 soldiers, heavy weapons, strong defenses." His soldiers nodded. They had heard speeches like this before. They had attacked enemy positions before. They had always lost. "But today is different," continued. He raised his new rifle. "Today we have teeth." The attack began at midnight. His unit moved through the forest surrounding the enemy base. They had studied the patrol patterns for weeks. They knew exactly where every guard would be. The first soldier died without knowing what hit him. The plasma round punched through his helmet and killed him instantly. His partner turned, confused, and died the same way. Soldiers moved like shadows. They had learned from 6 months of defeat. They knew how to hide. They knew how to wait. They knew how to strike without warning. The guards began to fall, 1 by 1, 2 by 2. By the time the alarm sounded, half the perimeter guards were already dead. The base commander sent soldiers to investigate. They marched out in formation, confident in their superior firepower. They met unit head-on. They raised their weapons, they fired, but soldiers did not die. They wore new armor designed by that could deflect plasma rounds, and they fired back. The commander watched his soldiers fall. He could not understand it. Human weapons had never hurt them before. Human weapons had always been useless. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the base belonged to the humans. Found the enemy commander hiding in a bunker. He was wounded but alive. Looked at him for a long moment. "Send a message to your admiral," said. "Tell him we are coming." While the ground war turned, something else was happening in orbit. For months, human engineers had been working in secret. They had collected wreckage from crashed ships. They had studied alien engines, weapons, and shields. They had built something impossible. Humanity's first space fleet. 23 ships, small, ugly, and held together with wire and prayers, but they flew. They had weapons, and they were ready to fight. Commander Shin took command of the fleet. She was 40 years old, a former naval captain who had never imagined she would fly in space, but the war had changed everyone. Her fleet faced 50 warships guarding the moon. The enemy ships were bigger, stronger, and more numerous. Any sane commander would have retreated. Was not sane. None of the humans were any more. "All ships," she said calmly, "attack formation. Target their engines first, make them bleed." The Battle of the Moon began. Commanders expected the humans to fight like other species, careful, organized, predictable. Instead, the human ships flew like maniacs. They dove between enemy formations. They fired at point-blank range. They rammed damaged ships when their weapons failed. The pilots could not keep up. They had been trained in academies. They had learned proper tactics. They followed rules. The humans had learned to fly from video games and simulations. They had no rules. They only had rage. Ship was hit early in the battle. Her engines failed. Her weapons went offline. She was drifting, helpless, toward a cruiser. She ordered her crew to abandon ship. Then she aimed her crippled vessel at the enemy. "Tell them," she said into her radio, "that we do not surrender. Tell them we do not stop. Tell them this is what humans do." Her ship crashed into the cruiser. Both ships exploded. When the battle ended, 19 human ships were destroyed, but 200 ships were burning wreckage. On Earth, people watched the footage. They saw their ships fighting. They saw sacrifice. They saw victory. For the first time in 6 months, humans began to hope. Admiral watched the same footage on his command ship. His hands were shaking. His fleet had been cut in half. His ground forces were losing territory. His soldiers were afraid. He sent a message to he needed reinforcements, more ships, more soldiers, more everything. The Empire sent help, but deep in his heart knew the truth. They were losing. The humans were winning. And the war was just beginning. 1 year after the invasion began, Admiral was recalled to he had failed. The greatest military commander in the Empire had been defeated by primitives. His replacement, Admiral, arrived with confidence and fresh troops. He studied the war reports. He made new plans. He promised the Emperor that Earth would fall within 3 months. 2 months later was dead. A human assassin had infiltrated his command ship. No one knew how. The security systems were perfect. The guards were everywhere. But somehow, a small human woman had crawled through the ventilation system, killed 6 guards with a knife and put a bullet through his head. She died seconds later, shot by the remaining guards, but she was smiling when she fell. On Earth, General O received the news. He nodded slowly. The assassin had been one of his best soldiers. She had volunteered for the mission knowing she would not return. "Find another target," he told his officers. "We do not stop until they are all dead." This was the new strategy, Operation Vengeance. Humans could not match in open battle, but they could strike from the shadows. They could make the enemy afraid to sleep. Across the occupied territories, human resistance cells activated. They attacked supply lines. They poisoned water sources. They planted bombs in buildings. They disappeared before they could respond. The aliens tried to find them. They searched houses. They interrogated prisoners. They burned entire neighborhoods, but the resistance only grew stronger. Private was 19 years old. Before the war, she had been a university student studying art. Now she was a killer. Her squad operated in the ruins they lived in the sewers, coming out only at night. They had been fighting for 8 months, had killed more soldiers than she could count. One night her squad was ambushed. Enemy soldiers surrounded them. Most of her team was killed in the first seconds, survived by hiding behind a pile of rubble. 3 soldiers came to find her. They thought she was wounded. They thought she was helpless. They were wrong. Had 1 knife and 1 working arm. Her left arm was broken, the bone sticking through the skin, but she did not stop. The first soldier died when she jumped on his back and drove the knife through his neck. The second died when she grabbed his own weapon and shot him in the face. The third tried to run. She caught him and killed him with her bare hands. When the rescue team found her, she was standing over the bodies, laughing. Blood covered her face. Her broken arm hung at her side, but she was alive. "Is that all you have?" she screamed at the sky. "Is that all you have?" Someone recorded the video. Within days, it had spread across the galaxy. Other species watched in shock. They had conquered them easily. They had surrendered quickly. They had accepted their fate. But these humans did not surrender. These humans laughed at death. These humans were insane. On a planet called Conquered by the centuries ago, a young alien watched the video he looked at his chains. He looked at his masters. And for the first time in his life, he felt something dangerous. Hope. Similar feelings spread across the Empire. Rebellion sparked in 12 systems. Conquered species remembered what freedom felt like. They saw the humans fighting and asked themselves a simple question. If they can resist, why can we not? The Emperor watched his empire begin to crack. He sent more ships to crush the rebellions, but every ship he sent away was a ship that could not fight the humans. Meanwhile, Earth scientists achieved the impossible. Doctor had continued her work. She had moved from weapons to engines. For months, she studied captured ships, trying to understand how they traveled between stars. The technology was called fold space drive. It bent space itself, allowing ships to cross enormous distances instantly. They had kept this technology secret for it was the source of their power. Cracked it in 11 months. Her team built the first human fold space engine in a shipyard beneath the ocean. They installed it in a new ship, the largest humanity had ever built. They called it humanity's answer. Admiral Nam took command. He was 50 years old, a quiet man with gray hair and sad eyes. He had been Shin's second in command at the Battle of the Moon. He had watched her die. He had never forgotten. "Where do we go?" his navigation officer asked. Looked at the star maps. He found the 17 star systems away, unreachable by conventional means, safe behind the greatest fleet in the galaxy. "There," he said, pointing. His officers stared at him. Some thought he was joking, others thought he was mad. "They brought the war to us," explained. "They burned our cities, they killed our families, they thought we would break." He paused. "Now we bring the war to them, we show them what humans do to their enemies." The crew cheered. 100 human ships gathered in orbit. Not just humanity's answer, but escorts, carriers, and support vessels. All of them equipped with fold space drives, all of them ready to fight. On the surface below, General O watched the fleet prepare to depart. He was old now, older than his years. The war had taken everything from him, his family, his friends, his health. But he was still standing. They were all still standing. "Go," he whispered to the ships above. "Go and finish this." The fleet activated their drives, space bent around them, and then they were gone. Destination, the heart of the empire. The hunt had begun. The Emperor was ancient. He had ruled for over 1,000 years. He had watched his empire grow from a single world to 17 star systems. He had seen dozens of species kneel before him. He had never known fear. Until today. The alarms began screaming at dawn. His advisors rushed into the throne room, their faces pale with terror. Enemy ships had appeared in orbit, not rebels, not rival empires. Humans. The Emperor walked to the observation window. He looked up at the sky. 100 ships hung above his. They were ugly, mismatched things, clearly built in haste. They looked like they might fall apart at any moment. But they were there, above his planet, above his palace, above him. How was this possible? On the bridge of humanity's answer, Admiral Nam looked down at the capital. It was a beautiful planet. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. It looked almost like Earth. For a moment he felt pity. These aliens had homes too. They had families. They had children. Then he remembered the burning cities, the mass graves, the children screaming as soldiers dragged them away. The pity died. "Open a channel," he ordered, "all frequencies." Ambassador Lee stepped forward. She was 40 years old, a diplomat who had spent 3 years watching her world burn. She had volunteered for this mission. She had wanted to deliver this message personally. The transmission began. Every screen on the showed her face. 3 years ago, said, "You came to our world, you gave us a choice. Surrender or die. You thought we would choose surrender. You thought we were weak." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We chose neither. We chose to fight. We chose to bleed. We chose to sacrifice everything. And now we are here." The Emperor watched from his throne room. His advisors whispered nervously. His guards gripped their weapons. "What do you want?" the Emperor demanded through the communication system. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Smiled coldly. "We want you to understand something. We are not your victims. We are not your slaves. We are your worst nightmare." Behind her, General O appeared on the screen. He was old and barely able to stand, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "You killed billions of our people," said. "You destroyed our cities. You thought you could break us, but we do not break. We bend, we bleed, we suffer, but we never break." The Emperor felt something he had never felt before, true fear, not of death, not of defeat, but of the creatures staring at him from the screen. They were not angry, they were not desperate, they were calm, patient, certain. That was the most terrifying thing of all. "What are you?" the Emperor whispered. Heard the question. She stepped closer to the camera. "We are human," she said. "We are afraid, we are weak. We are mortal, but we do not give up, we do not forgive, and we never ever forget." Behind the human fleet, more ships began to appear. Not human ships, ships from 7 different species, races that had been conquered by the centuries ago, races that had watched humanity fight and remembered their own courage. They had created their own destruction. By attacking Earth, they had shown the galaxy that resistance was possible. Now that resistance had come home. "You have 30 minutes, said. "Surrender unconditionally, or we will burn your world the way you burned ours." The transmission ended. The Emperor sat in silence. His advisors argued around him. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate, others wanted to flee. The Emperor looked at them all. He looked at the ships in the sky. He looked at his own reflection in the window. He was tired, so very tired. 12 minutes later, the Empire surrendered. The war was over. On Earth, the news spread within hours. People poured into the streets, crying and laughing and hugging strangers. After 3 years of darkness, the sun had finally risen. General O received the news in a hospital bed. His body was failing. The doctors said he had days, maybe hours. He smiled anyway. "We did it," he whispered to the nurse beside him. "We actually did it." He died that night peacefully, knowing that humanity had survived. 50 years later, the galaxy had changed. The Empire was gone, replaced by a coalition of free species. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, respected and feared in equal measure. An old scholar visited Earth to write a history of the war. He interviewed many survivors, but one conversation stayed with him forever. Park was now an old man. His hair was white, his body weak, but his mind was still sharp. He remembered the night he first saw the alien fleet. He remembered the fear, the despair, the certainty that humanity would die. "Were you afraid," the scholar asked, "when you saw our ships?" Nodded slowly. "Terrified, I thought we were finished." "But you fought anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Thought about the question for a long time. He thought about all the people who had died, all the sacrifices, all the pain. "Because that is what humans do," he finally said. "We are not the strongest species. We are not the or the fastest, but we are the most stubborn creatures in the universe. We will crawl through fire, drag ourselves through mud, and keep fighting until our bodies give out." He looked at the scholar with tired eyes that had seen the birth of a new era. "And even then," he added quietly, "even then our ghosts will haunt you." The scholar finished his book, entitled The Final Chapter, with the words that had become famous across the galaxy. "Congratulations, you just declared war on the most deadliest species alive." Humanity had proven those words true, and the universe would never forget it.